Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Record Breakers. I am Petey Rave, your man with no plan. Here with me, as always, is my crew, my team. We've got none other than Patrick.
Hola.
We've got Drew.
Howdy.
And we've got Brett.
I'm feeling pretty down right now, guys.
We're here, guys, to talk about music, and the provider of said music this week is none other than Patrick. Patrick, what do you got for us this week?
This week I decided we needed to talk about an emo classic from a band called Texas Is the Reason and their album Do You Know Who You Are?
Let's talk about expectations. Drew, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
Well, I knew of Texas Is the Reason because I also grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and listened to emo. So Texas Is the Reason is something I very much knew of. I may have listened to this record in my past quite a bit. So it's sort of weird getting into my expectations because my expectations are what the next block is always. So I'm going to stop speaking.
Brett, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Texas Is the Reason that the president's dead is a lyric that I'm familiar with. When I started listening to this album, I noticed a few things. We had some nasally vocals and stuff, some mopey melodies. I knew I had an emo album on my hands. I did not know ahead of time what I was getting into. More after the break.
Yes. Patrick, why don't you go ahead and describe this album thematically? What makes this album tick?
To me, this is the gap that bridges between the sort of the two bands that started emo, Sunny Day Real Estate and Jawbreaker, if you don't include reaching back to like Husker Du and Rites of Spring, sort of the first bands that got called emo. This is one of the bands that came out of that and sort of bridged the gap. There's definitely a strong side of early 90s indie rock to them, but you know, like Brett said, there's the nasally emo vocals, very, very heartfelt lyrics, and kind of coming out of, you know, punk and showing that punk can have feelings. It doesn't all have to be about how fast you can play or how tough you can be. It was sort of the other side of that coin.
Interesting way to put it. Drew, what would be the themes and elements that caught your attention about this album?
Well, this album, and it's sort of weird talking about this album because this is Texas Is the Reason. If you want to go listen to Texas Is the Reason, you get this album, or you get nothing else they ever made ever. Because they absolutely exploded after this. They were just about to like get major record deals, and like every other emo band that almost gets a record deal, they explode.
They talked about it in the emo game.
They do. It's the 3 album rule. You get 3 albums or you turn into Chris Carrabba. That's a funny reference for everybody that gets it. So they're absolutely a love it. Texas Is the Reason is absolutely a love it or hate it sort of thing. And Swagger's not exaggerating. They're the inspiration for a lot of what came out of the mid to late, or what came out of the late 90s, early 2000s emo sort of scene. This is that like mid 90s emo personified to me. That's what this album is. That somehow one album encapsulated everything that was the genre. If you've listened to the bands like Stray Light Run, Brand New, Saves the Day that came after them, then they've all drawn inspirations from pieces of this, and you can hear it. You can hear it very well here. The focus on like almost discordant guitar swells, quick drops, palm mutes, like that very quickly hit in, are all like sort of the sound that you get from this era of emo. Vocal parts that focus that are nasally at times, of course, you do get that. But the focus really on personal sort of lyrics in a weird way. That's what comes to define what emo is even to this day. As it got sort of weird and into like the scenester stuff, but like that's another day. It encompassed all of them very well. It is what it is. We're gonna get to Brett in a second. And this album is not going to change your mind on what emo music is. They're not going to be some saving grace. They're not going to be it's going to be very hard if you don't like emo to find, as Brett usually puts it, the gold in them there hills. You're just not going to do it. But if you enjoy the bands that I listed previously, your Stray Light Runs, your Saves the Days, your Brand News, Taking Back Sundays and all that, if you enjoy that sort of stuff and you haven't gone back, this is a good place to jump back to. Maybe not going so early as like the Promise Ring and stuff like that, but maybe jump back to 96.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I will say I like quite a few of the bands you listed, but I can't say that I totally love this album. But Brett, I'll go to Brett. You might be able to articulate a few of the thoughts. Brett, what would be the themes and elements that you caught? That caught your attention?
Golden M Hills. I would have got some coal and been happy. No, I started out on this. I wanted to remove all my prejudice of the angsty genre that I loathe. So, and I really don't want this to be like my scathing review of the genre as a whole, but it hits every trope of the genre. And it's also old. Like this album is almost old enough to drink. And I understand that. Well, I imagine, I don't understand, but I imagine that this was a trailblazing, album for, the future skinny jeans wearing side bangs having youths. But, I had to also step back and think that this was closer to the new romantic scene than it is to today. So like there is really no genre I relate to less than emo. But it does have the droning sounds of like, there's nothing really upbeat about anything. I will get into the jangle nothingness for a set amount of minutes, later, that I talked to DJM about on a previous episode. But like, there's something about writing a song, like even the thought of like, I want to listen to music because I want to feel like garbage is not something that I can ever really relate to. And the droning on it's downbeat singing, but also oversang at the same time. It's twang guitar, but it's not fun twang like surf music twang or hillbilly country twang. Even if I was going to compare and contrast, I'd take like 5 honky tonk rapper records to listening to this one more time today, which, mind you, today I've listened to this album 6 times, trying to draw, like, squeeze whatever I could squeeze out of it. But like, there's just something about it. And like you said, the emo bands don't really have a longevity, Drew. I can imagine the kind of people that come up with the kind of music that we're listening to not being very good with other people over long periods of time doing music. So like, again, it's hard for me to really latch on to the magnetism that this has to pubescent teens and people that act like them.
Yes.
You just described me.
Yes. Yeah, and let's get into kind of some of the key tracks, Patrick. What would be some of the tracks that you would zero in on?
Record Breakers thing, Johnny on the Spot, the opener. I love the way the album kicks off. It's just kind of gives you an idea exactly where you're going. The drums on this record are way better than most of the other emo stuff you usually get. Just really, really good throughout and kind of driving and really perfectly in the mix. Vocals are emo vocals. There's a little bit of nasal to it, but I really personally like it, but I'm an emo nerd. It doesn't get full on whiny like the Chris Carabas of the world, who basically cries through his songs, but it has feeling.
Dashboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I'm the only one.
I know. You're literally two people in the world love Dashboard Confessional, Drew. You and Chris Caraba. Yeah, you and Chris Caraba himself.
I like him.
There were some girls that I dated back in 2002 that liked them.
Dude,
like
if you wanted to bang emo girls, learn a couple of Dashboard.
No. You stay away from that. We call that daddy issues. No.
Don't care. You haven't seen my list of exes.
And the other one I'd probably mention is Back into the Left. You kind of get a little bit more of their punk edge there. It's a little bit more high energy, and it comes off of an instrumental track that's, really soft, and it really kind of kicks you back and wakes you back up for the end of the record. And it's a fun song. And it's one of those ones that gets remembered by them, I think.
Yeah. I will throw my hat. I would say I'd throw my name in the hat of somebody who loves Dashboard, but Drew.
3 people.
Yes, 3 people.
3.
Drew, what would be some of the key tracks that caught your attention?
I'm going to go with the Magic Bullet Theory. I'm going to touch on both of the JFK songs, oddly enough. So the Magic Bullet Theory, the palm muted opening into that sort of discordant guitar melody is something that for me is a bit nostalgic. Like I've said before, the misfit emo kid in me was very much my junior high freshman year. So that's sort of something that Texas is the reason, and the bands that sort of gained inspiration from that was something I listened to a lot of at that point in my life. So it's something that just sort of reminds me of that, brings me back to that time, which is good and bad, I guess. Nickel Wound. The quiet, twinkly guitars in a verse that swells into a chorus. And the chorus is very much more loud. That's sort of the cliche of emo music. That is, they've been doing that since the 80s, and it comes through here. I mean, they did it in just emo, grunge was known to do it here and there. The Nickel Wound did it very much so. And then, as I said, I'm going to touch on both JFK songs, Back into the Left. The quick discordant hits, the distortion in the beginning, leads into this really cool driving song. And the lyrics to me were kind of cool because it was like that looking down your nose, sort of contempt and slight anger in the sadness that was there is something that when I listen to this genre of music now, I tend to gravitate towards that more so than I do the very, very, very cry alone to myself sort of stuff. It's more the slight anger and the contempt that I sort of dig on a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Brett, what songs caught your attention, if any?
This is not this isn't like a prog rock album that I was completely lost in.
Yes.
There were songs to latch onto, such as the opening track. It really tells you what you're getting into. You start this album, you know exactly what to expect coming through. If you have ever been in a car stuck listening to other people's CD collections. But Do You Know Who You Are is that thing that I was talking with DJM about, where it's the trope of the I'm gonna strum a guitar while somebody goes and does this discordant, almost it's music that has no value other than making an ambient feeling, almost more of a build-up piece. That is a track that did it, and did it better than any type I've ever heard before, ever. But then it leads into Back into the Left, which, it's about the most punchy song, if you're grading on a curve, that you can get out of this album. Compared to the rest of it, you can see that there were people that came from a different music scene and then evolved into this. It ain't the Misfits, but I didn't expect that either. And from there, I throw up the white flag. I don't know. I give up. I don't know. Am I just not hip and with it for 20 years ago? I'm like, I tried. I really tried.
Well, wait, okay. So the difference is so when me and Drew were in our angsty teenage years, we were angsty and listened to angsty music. When you were in your angsty teenage years, you were not angsty and you really didn't listen to angsty music.
No, when I was a teenager, I listened to the music of I was an angsty teen that took it out with aggression and power, and burning things and pissing on people's cars.
Here's the thing. I had half and half. I had half I listened to. I was with my skater friends listening to skate punk about skate punk things, and then there was I was the type of kid that I would sit alone in my room, I would write, and I would listen to music that it is I guess this is getting into the next block. I don't know if we want to do that, but as we're getting into the next block, I guess I'll say that like there was a time when what I would do is I would listen to music not for the music so much as for that sense of the things that I liked were things that other people liked, and I was looking for validation. And that's sort of what I got from here was that from bands like Texas is the Reason, from the whole emo scene, was that the fact that I liked punk rock music and that I liked that sort of edge to my music and that I liked that sort of style, but I liked getting into what made human emotion tick on a gamut from having fun to anger to sadness to melancholy to that sort of forlorn feeling, and having all of that within different bands. And you had bands like Texas is the Reason that like Saves the Day, like Jimmy World, like The Promise Ring, that would touch on those subjects, made it feel for like an angsty teen, for like a sad like misfit kid, made it feel all right.
Well, I mean, I understand that, and I do respect people's abilities to have different musical tastes, but like at that time I was as far away from somebody that wanted to have implosive feelings. I wanted to have explosive energy. I wanted to listen to people that were telling me that, like Bad Religion, that it's all just chemicals in your body. It's just, look at this as like a very simple you're just zeros and ones organically. Fuck the kids of NoFX, where it's like, you just don't care. Like it's one of those things where instead of like going into myself, I was more out there and more expressive. And I know there are people that, like, I guess my super mopey days were before I was even a teenager. Yeah. So like I was ready to go and throw bottles at people's cars and shoot potato guns at like RVs and be a jackass instead of sitting at home writing poetry and playing JRPGs. Yeah, although I did that, but I didn't write poetry.
Yeah, I will say that
I did the other half.
Yeah, I will say that the thing is with this, I understand that. I definitely like I said, I enjoyed a lot of the bands that came after. Like, he said Straight Lie Run, a couple of songs. I love Take Back Sunday. I love a few of the other bands. I will say that the feeling with this one, I didn't quite enjoy this one. I almost feel like all those bands that came afterwards took what this kind of started going forward with and made it a whole lot better and did it better and did it more with better quality.
Would you say that Seinfeld isn't funny? The trope, I think it's one of those things where a band that's early and inspired other ones
can be appreciated for being early and being inspiring other ones, but not necessarily have to be good.
Yeah, like early Black Flag, pre Hank Rollins.
Yeah, like it's there. It was there for a reason. It brought things that came afterwards, but then everybody fixed it. Everybody else fixed it. Everybody else took that idea and they fixed it. You know, I will say that's my feeling on emo. I think we basically we did the final thoughts in the segment without my prompting. Hey, wait a minute! You're taking my only job. What's going on here?
Sorry, I tried to stop myself.
Hey, it's all I've got.
This is our first ever perfectly smooth transition. First one ever.
Awkwardly transitioning in between segments is my only thing. It's the only thing I bring to the
You're
table.
the anti-Tom Merritt.
Oh, side note, while we're ending that, I'm gonna be the only one, I guess, that sides with Swagger. If you're into that sort of thing, go check it out. I dig it. There is, I forget who made it. I know there is a punk band though that made a song called Texas Is the Reason That Emo Sucks. And I think that more speaks to Brett than it does to me.
Yes.
Hey, don't put me in a box. I'm home, man.
No. You found good things about Jimmy Eat World, which is one of the bands.
I feel like
I
Jimmy
would
E.
put
World
Kim
is the disconnected continuation of Texas Is the Reason. You hear this, and then you go listen to Clarity and Blade American, and it's a fucking straight line in between.
Yeah. But those
Jim
are better
Atkins is
albums.
just a better vocalist.
Oh my
please.
god, he's such a better vocalist. But
Yeah.
now we're gonna get into me nitpicking about
No,
emo music and Loving Saves the Day and
Yeah.
But yeah, let's.
We're going on a film sack in the weeds.
We're
like,
sure,
talk about-
rat hole. We're getting into a rat hole.
Photos and
We're getting into a rat hole.
my
But yeah.
2-sentence pitch of why you should listen to this record. If you ever were into any bits of emo, this is going back and finding your roots. That's what it is. It's knowing where it came from.
To a
It's
point.
not, it's not the best emo record ever, but like you need to hear Jawbreaker once. You need to hear Sunny Day Real Estate. You need to hear Texas Is the Reason.
And now
It's
I
one
have.
record. And now you have, and now we can go on and listen to whatever's next.
Yes.
you're gonna listen to Jawbreaker?
I'd rather.
How about
I'd
some
rather-
glass jaw?
Oh, God.
Fuck all y'all.
My
Fuck
subconscious.
Glassjaw.
God damn. Fuck
Oh my
Glassjaw.
god, Glassjaw.
I'd love to say that I deliberately killed that episode. Just because I hated Black Glass Shaw.
Shot it.
But considering I
it was still one of the
also.
better episodes, to be fair.
Yes, it was. That was, I feel like, the episode that really cemented Brett hates all of my music.
Well, it was the first use of farting a better tune through a tuba that I've ever used.
Yes. But like I said, I would like to say I deliberately killed that episode, but then again, I also accidentally killed Moody
Killed the
Blues.
greatest episode we ever recorded.
Yes,
that
Moody
no one ever
Blues,
heard.
with one of the best albums we ever talked about, which is Moody Blues. Thanks to Squiggles. Thanks,
Black
Squiggles.
Flag.
And we also killed Squiggles in the episode, and I would never do that to Squiggles. I love Squiggles. But that being said, moving on. We basically covered that last C block, like I said. We talked about our final thoughts, and we got an idea of what we thought about this album. Let's go into our haikus. The main of the end of the evening, haiku reviews. Let's see how we do it. I'll start with Brett for the flow. What is your haiku?
Oh, for the flow. Every emo trope, they just might have done it first, but I don't care.
Drew, what is your haiku?
90s emo is packaged in 9 forlorn songs. Needs more Ray Capo.
I'll do my haiku. 'Twas kinda drony. It just mostly meandered. Didn't quite inspire. Patrick, what is your haiku?
In just one record, they helped define a genre. Oh, what could have been.
We could have gotten so many disappointing follow-up albums. But that being said, yeah, those are our thoughts on Texas Is the Reason. You can find that on our Spotify playlists by playing Record Breakers, the home game. Don't panic, Drew.
Look, I always forget about Spotify. I'm reminded.
Yes. Eventually it will be up there. So
At some point.
you can find it on Spotify otherwise anyways, or you can find it on the various music sources. On that Spotify playlist probably, or on Spotify in general, is going to be our next album. And on various other places, and probably places with higher bitrate, like Tidal or Deezer, you probably prefer to check it out on, or just get your vinyl copy out and just bust that out. It's gonna be Brett's album.
Don't do vinyl ever.
So
What's you got?
y'all know that this album was lacking in a couple things, like audio tracks of chirping birds, the curse of immortality, and spaceships flying into black holes. We'll get all of those on next week's episode, where we do A Farewell to Kings by the amazing Canadian trio known as Rush.
It has no moose knuckle, but
No,
we're gonna have to live without it.
The album to pull over and show said moose knuckle, but I will warn you, trigger warning, it gets weird if the warning of spaceships flying into black holes isn't enough. It gets weird. This is not the most accessible Rush, but it makes it the best Rush.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is going to be next week. But this is this week, and this brings us to the end of another episode of Record Breakers. You can find us all over the internet. Patrick is at Swagger. Brett is at Hibbity Bibbert, HIBBITYBIBBARD. Drew is at XJuciferX. I am at PD Rave. The show's at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4. Record Breakers, recordbreakerspodcast.com, recordbreakerspodcast at gmail.com, rebelli.net for this and other shows, Rebelli TV on YouTube. Subscribe, share, like, do the things, tell people about us. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.